Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming today. You know, this is a kickoff and this is something different than what I normally do. Many of you have already seen my work. I'm a trainer, I'm a facilitator, and I'm always teaching a principle. We got to apply it, measure the metrics, da, 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 da. This is not that. This is none of that. I see it as almost a massage into new ideas and a collaboration, a support, some networking. Let me digress for a moment. In acting, when you're acting in front of a camera, there's what's called a mark. You step up onto your mark and you say your lines, right? Most people believe what you do on that mark is what people see. What you do on that mark is about 5% of what people see. What they really see is what got you to that mark, your story, your life, the things that happened that got you to that mark. And it's the same exact thing in communications presentations. People tend to think what I say in that moment is what people get, but really what they're getting is the story that got you there and your values behind your story, what that story means to you. And as it relates to technical communications, I get really excited. This is one of my little things that keeps me up at night, because so many times in technical communications, there's a sense that it's technical. So I'm just going to say the technical information. If it was only that, we wouldn't have to say it, because we could send it in a memo if it was that. But what it's really is about what got us there that makes people trust us or not. Today, we have Kathy Nelson. She's a senior principal at West Monroe, a consulting firm based in Chicago. She has nearly 29 years of experience as a telecommunications engineer in the utility industry. In addition to being an engineer, Kathy hosts a podcast, Ordinarily, Extraordinarily, Conversations with Women in STEM, which is listened to in over 100 countries. She served on the board of directors at Utilities Technology Council, an industry trade association, for 10 years, including serving as chairwoman from 2017 to 2018. Kathy is a registered professional engineer in Minnesota. She's also a mom to 3 children, 16, 20, 23, and to a 4-year-old sheepadoodle whom she adopted as her children were beginning to move out. Everyone give Kathy a warm cyber welcome.
Hey, everyone. Happy to be here.
Thank you. I want to talk about Kathy before she tells her story. I'm going to tell you a little bit. Kathy, we've been working together for what, 6 years, Kathy? We immediately had a real good connection. Her spirit, her sense of fairness, her attitude is something so delightful and positive, and she's brilliant. She's brilliant, and I love brilliant people, and I love great people. We started off her working with me, and we became colleagues and friends. She supports my work, I support hers. I was one of her guests on her podcast, and now she's kicking off the roundtable. So I want to say, Kathy, thank you. It's an honor to have you here, and I'm really excited it's you that's kicking this off.
Thanks, Anthony. I'm super happy to be here and love working with you, and so happy to see everyone today and to see everyone on camera. It's so good to see people.
What was your background? And then once we go there, we're going to go into some of the trials, tribulations, challenges, and where the breakthroughs were for you.
All right, so I'm going to go back a bit, and then I'm not going to spend like a lot of time in the back history, but I do want to start with the fact that I started out as an engineer in the utility industry 29 years ago. There were not many women. I feel like that's such a small statement, because the number of women in the utility industry was so extraordinarily small. At my utility, I was the first woman that was ever out in the field with the field crews. I had never seen a woman out in the field before. And it was intimidating. And in order to deal with that intimidation, I very much felt like I needed to be one of the guys. Like I was not my authentic self whatsoever. I did not talk about things that I did that I thought were, I would say, like more feminine. I baked cakes, I sewed my clothes. I never wanted to talk about that because I wanted to be one of the guys. And I think that's like a huge disservice. I don't know that I would have done anything differently at that point in time, just because that's how the industry was. And it's changing. And that kind of like goes into like how my communication style and skills were at the time. I was trying to fit in. And I think what, like, as a lot of my presentations at that time were technical, I was young, felt like I was experienced, it felt like I didn't know things. And I think that we have this idea, and Anthony talked about this at the beginning, that, you know, we're delivering technical information, it should be almost cold and sterile. And that's kind of how I probably presented, you know, did my technical presentations early on in my career. I, shortly after I started at my company, I want to say within maybe a couple of years, our company formed a Toastmasters group. And so I joined Toastmasters. I did that for about 10 years to try to get comfortable public speaking. I was not comfortable at all speaking in public. So I joined Toastmasters, which helped a lot. I also started like lecturing at my church so that I could try to get comfortable just being in front of a large group of people. And I did what I could to kind of put myself out there. I met Anthony, like Anthony said, about 6 years ago, and he was actually working with my company, Great River Energy at the time. He still works with them, by the way. And he was working with leadership, executive leadership, helping facilitate their communication skills. And I would hear stories about how emotional these sessions within the executive leadership would get. Like they're like the attorney at Great River cried in one of Anthony's sessions, in a good way, by the way, but don't get that wrong. Like it was in a good way. But the emotions that I would hear from these sessions about that Anthony was facilitating, and this was before it came down to a level that I had access to. And then I would conversely hear about him going out to like our power plants. And by the way, I say we and our because I was there for 25 years. It's really hard for me to get out of that company. So he would go to the power plants and work with the leadership teams and the engineering teams at the power plants. And they also loved Anthony. And I'm like, you know, if you can connect with executive leadership and you can connect with field crews, that's really, really impressive. And then they started having these sessions that they would let anybody come to. And so I started going to Anthony's sessions at my old company. And it was just this whole hodgepodge of people from different walks of the company, which was great because you don't necessarily get to interact with these people. And you would like literally like would bare your soul. And by the way, let me also say this is like in a good way, in a very safe place. But it was very authentic, very genuine. And Anthony talks about the work that he does, the exercises that he would have us do as an engineer for me were terrifying. And I'll talk about this a little bit later when I get into more like the one-on-one work that Anthony did with me. But because he takes things from his acting background and it's so different than Toastmasters or these very like prescribed formulas of how to speak and how to communicate. But it's so genuine and so authentic that you dig into something that you don't know is necessarily there. So Anthony, you look like you want to say something.
In your journey, you started off like this. How was it being, you mentioned being the only woman in STEM or one of the only women in STEM at the time. What was that dynamic like regarding when you were the only woman at the seat at the table kind of thing?
You know, it's interesting because the time that I was coming into the industry, this was the norm, right? So when I graduated from college, there were 4 women in my graduating class of 75. Being the only woman at the table, being the only woman at the field, it was the norm. I didn't know any different. I didn't know any different until I started seeing things differently at different companies and meeting different people in the industry. I think that you have to be a little bit more vocal you have to defend your territory because people will try to speak on top of you. And I think when you're young, you let them speak on top of you. And as you get older, you find your voice and you find your confidence and you start interrupting back or taking your space back or speaking up for another woman who might be at the table that's younger, that's not speaking up for herself. But it's very much, it felt very normal.
Okay.
Because there wasn't, I didn't know any differently, right? This is the only industry that I had been in.
Tell us about when you started to hit your diminished return, when there was that ceiling, and what that meant for you, what that was for you, how you felt about it. Let's go there.
Yeah, so I got to the point I was pretty comfortable giving technical presentations, and that's mostly what I did. I would go to conferences, I gave technical presentations. I felt pretty comfortable. How my delivery was, I don't know, right? I mean, you think that you're good, you don't know if you're good or not. I mean, that's on the receiving side. I would tend to have people at my technical sessions, but maybe it was the material that they were interested in, and maybe that I wasn't that good of a speaker. I don't know. As I started moving into, so within the trade association that I chaired, it's a 3-week journey to get, or a 3-year journey to get there. So you start out as secretary treasurer, you move into vice chair and then to chair. And so, and you have time to prepare. So I started working with Anthony on a one-on-one basis the year that I was vice chair in preparation, because I knew that I was going to need to do keynote speeches. And that's a whole different level than a technical presentation. Like, good keynote speakers own the stage. They connect with their audience. They bring them in. It's a whole different experience. And I wanted to be somebody who people wanted to listen to. I didn't want to be somebody that was up on a stage that people were like very uncomfortably looking at their phones and thinking like, oh my God, can she just get off there? I did not want to be that. And so that's when I started working with Anthony. And I do want to talk about something so when I started working with Anthony, like on a one-on-one basis, and we did a lot of Zoom calls, same kind of exercises that we did in the, larger meetings and stuff. I will say this, I talk about this with Anthony, and how much I've talked about this, it felt like a root canal. It was so painful for me because it was it was so out of my comfort zone as an engineer, but so important to get to the next level and to be able to find my voice and find my authentic self and tap into who I was that I had hidden away for probably the first 20 years of my career. And that's what Anthony helped me tap into. And for me, there's two, Anthony talks about what were the turning points, and there's two. One is I found it okay to be me, and that it was better to be me than to try to be somebody else, or to try to be somebody that is just presenting information and technical information. It's okay to bring emotion and stories into technical presentations. And those stories are what makes us unique and individual. And I might go off on tangents and people be like, oh my God, why is she talking about herself again? But for me, that's who I am, and that's what I bring. The second time for me that the work that I did with Anthony came out very much as a turning point. When I was giving my first keynote presentation, this was when I was elected chairwoman of UTC, the power went out about, 3 minutes into my presentation. Everything went dark. And I will say, from feedback that I got from other people, this is also, and probably how I felt. I was a little bit nervous, a little jittery. The power went out and it was dark for at least 5 minutes. I sat and talked to the people that were in the front row. I was with, this is a trade association that are some of my, best friends in the industry. It's a great place to be. And in that 5 minutes that probably in the past would have made me very flustered, I actually settled into myself. And so when the lights came back and I went back to giving my presentation, I felt very comfortable. I will say I spent a lot of time working on that speech. It was not something that I just did off the cuff. It's great if people can do that. I can't. But that was a turning point for me because I could talk about that. I could make jokes about these things happening. And, I find if you can be authentic and genuine about how you're feeling, it takes away some of the scariness. You can say, hey, I'm intimidated. Well, that was weird, like I'm sure flustered now. And it takes some of that away. And that's kind of what the work with Anthony has done.
Why were you comfortable? I know the answer, but why were you able to be comfortable and be peaceful in that moment of the blackout? That's an important thing, right? Because things like that freak people out. It bothers me.
Mhm.
I hate technical stuff. When I'm working and presenting, I'm like, why isn't this thing working? You know what I mean? And it could bring anxiety and all these different things. Why do you believe you were peaceful in that moment? This is what I'm hoping is one takeaway, because we all have these moments many times in our lives.
So I think there's a number of reasons, and some of them are specific to the group of people that I was with, and some of them are things that I have learned over time. So I was with a group of people that I'm very comfortable with. Although I want to say there's somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 people. I was not necessarily comfortable with all of them, but the people sitting in the front, I was just having a conversation with them, which really took away a lot of that stress. I'm just, talking to them, chit-chatting. Secondly, it was something that was out of my control, and it was a shared experience, right? So I wasn't the one trying to get the technology to work. There were people in the back freaking out, trying to get stuff reconnected when that happened. But I think what I was able to, from a standpoint of like skill sets and things that I have learned, is that I can take that experience and, that is connecting us all, right? We're all sitting in the dark. And we've all been in that situation of having that anxiety and having those things out of our control. And you can make jokes about it, right? Like you can talk about it. You could say, you can bring that comfort. I think pointing out that shared experience and how uncomfortable you are puts other people at ease. And that's not something that I probably would have thought to tap into.
I believe that communications really breaks down to four relationships. I see it as relationships. I don't see it as something we do. And what is your relationship with the audience? Kathy, in that event, her relationship was quite comforting. There was a nurturing aspect to it. That's helpful. You don't always get that. What's your relationship to your material? How do you feel in relationship to what are you like, oh my God, I don't know this. This is over my head. Are you there, or are you comfortable with your relationship with your material? Third, what's your relationship to yourself? If your relationship to yourself is you, by default, there's high levels of stress, insecurity, question, all of that, it's really difficult. Now, the work that you've done a lot of work, Kathy, on yourself. When you're at peace with yourself, things are going to happen and you'll be able to roll with it more. Where I'm trying to go with this in a little bit of something just to think about is, Kathy, we've been in very good contact in 6 years. Almost every time we talk, or just about, there's this something you've worked on with yourself, some kind of self-discovery, whether it was through a hike you've taken or a run that you did, or something
Therapy,
whatever it is. So I just wanted to put that out.
Here's like one of the things that I think is hard. Like I still feel like I'm not a great communicator. I don't know, like I'm not on the receiving end of me, and sometimes I still feel very uncomfortable. And I also feel like it's a muscle that you have to use. Like Anthony talked about running. You run, you train, you got to keep doing it. I will say, like when I came back after COVID, when probably none of us had been doing presentations for 2 years, and I would be in meetings and I changed jobs and I would be in meetings with clients, I would get uncomfortable again. And I would be like, you need to work that muscle. You need to be, it's not something that you're just like, oh, I'm there, I'm a great communicator. Not, at least not for me. Maybe it works that way for some people. It doesn't work that way for me. And so I need to be in an environment where I am communicating. I will say, like, the year that I chaired UTC, I did probably 5 or 6 keynotes, and I was much, much, much more comfortable then. And I could easily go into a room of 1,000 people and present now. And I will also say, like, webinars and things that are virtual are really, really hard. Like, that's a whole nother skill set. It's hard. You can't read an audience. We're all like little tiny thumbnails. You can't see if people are listening to you, if you're getting feedback. And so I still feel like, Anthony, you talk about like me going from here to here. I still feel like I'm like down here. I still think it's hard. So I think it's a work in progress.
Absolutely. I asked some questions to Kathy and to kind of break this open. Does anyone want to massage into this and ask her anything or connect with her about something, give some feedback and opinion?
It's Liana. I had a couple of things, Kathy. The first thing was I'm surprised that you felt uncomfortable, because I know you do your podcast and I listen to your podcast. So I'm kind of surprised that you feel comfortable. Do you think that's a completely, again, another different type of skill set when you're doing your podcast versus doing a keynote versus doing a technical presentation?
I do. I think that they're all different formats. I will say there are certain times on my podcast that I'm not comfortable. So my episode that came out yesterday was with a Harvard professor. I was damn intimidated by this conversation. I was terrified the night before because I'm like, how do I talk to quantum engineering, quantum, like photonics, and like words that I didn't even know existed. And so like going into that was terrifying, but you know what? It turns out we're all humans. And so in my conversation with her, it brings it all down, because if you're a CEO, if you're a Harvard professor, if you're a student that's just graduating, we're all human. And if we can, I think, remember that. And not to say that I don't get intimidated when I'm talking to a CEO or something, when I'm doing a presentation, like with a client or something, like it's still intimidating to me. But if you can bring it down to like, at our base level, we're all the same and we're all similar. And the podcast is also one-on-one. So that makes it's a very intimate, casual setting. And that expectation is there, that it's this informality that exists that doesn't necessarily exist when you're in a work environment, depending on what that work environment is. But we're all humans at the end of the day. And I think if you can connect with that, I think that helps a lot.
When did you talked about kind of those key pivotal moments when you felt that your communication had changed and you had kind of overcome that plateau. Did you experience a difference in how people responded to you when your communication style changed? I'm
going to say there's in 2 different ways. So I don't know, and in a way, I don't care, but it's not that I don't care. It's more of how I feel about it. Like, I'm feeling more comfortable, and if I'm feeling comfortable with how I'm communicating, I'm okay with that. If people don't necessarily receive that, I'm more okay with that. And I think part of that's age, part of that is, the work that I've done on communicating, finding my authentic self and being okay with being me. That was huge. Like, I'm okay being me, and the fact that it took me so long to get there is just mortifying to me. Like, why wasn't I okay with being myself earlier on? And so I'm okay if I'm not necessarily received well, as long as I feel good about what I'm doing and what I'm presenting.
Beautiful. Liana, love the question, love the answer, love it.
The one thing that it took me years to discover, and I probably discovered it back in the 80s, not when I was in my 80s, but back in the 80s, is our presentations, whether it's a one-on-one, whether it's a Zoom call, whether we're in front of 1,000 people, has nothing to do with us. It's about them. And if we take the spotlight off of ourselves and we put the spotlight on the people that we're meeting with or in the audience, and we try and make everything that we're doing about them, and the key word that I like to use is engagement. You've got to engage your audience in such a way where they go, wait a minute, I got to listen to this one.
Kathy was dealing with the spectrum on the radios for all of the co-ops. And the spectrum was changing, and it was going to cost the co-ops probably a huge investment that they already had a large amount of investment in. And, you know, she was delivering news also that was possibly not so welcoming. So on top of your audience, you also, yeah, I think you should give yourself a lot more credit, because you also had to more or less sell that idea to the audience and give them all the information that they needed to help them understand that it was costing everyone, and you know, that you were a part of that solution. But I remember you being fabulous, and I'd love to see you today, Kathy. when you're in that keynote audience and in presentation, you know, it seems like the expectation is higher for your address.
I think that there's a higher expectation. Yes, like me as an audience member going in, I'm expecting more from a keynote address, because in some cases they are paid. In some cases, you know, like I did a keynote where a company paid my travel expenses to come in and talk to a group of women at the utility, and I felt more pressure for that, because somebody was paying me to come talk. Whether it's, you know, more self-pressure, you know, I think that's what it is. I think it's self-pressure. Like, I don't think that there's necessarily anything more than that, but I did feel a pressure to step up my game and to be very well prepared and to have good content and a good delivery.
One of the main takeaways I always say, and as a tip or something, is that when you're speaking, you have to own emotionally and intellectually, own the attitude that your audience needs you and your message deeply, that they are bleeding. And the way they're bleeding will stop is if you help them. If you take that, it goes back to what Eric was saying, that it's not about you, it's about them. I don't know if people need what I have to say. I don't know. And maybe people don't. Maybe people do, but my attitude is that they need it. And because my attitude is that they need it, that allows me to engage. That allows me to get in there into the surgery room and into the ER room. And that goes to me back to what you were saying earlier, whether it's a keynote, whether it's a team meeting, whether it's just a technical, especially in technical presentations. And why do I say technical, especially with technical, is that so many technical presentations are sterile. Because there's not an attitude that they really need the information. And if they really need the information, it's not like you're going to say it, you know, screaming, you know, banging your hands, but there's something about that allows you to connect that much further to someone for them to make a judgment on what to do with that information.
I think you've done some sessions on this, Anthony, that is, you know, bringing the emotional side, I don't know exactly what you call it, but bringing the emotional side into technical presentations. And I think we're taught, or maybe we're not taught, maybe we just assume by watching stuff, I don't know, that you keep emotions out of technical presentations. And it's a paradigm shift, right? It's like you have to change your mind, you have to change your perspective. I think it makes for a much richer presentation. We'll see. I've got a couple technical presentations coming up in not too long. We'll see if I can bring that emotion in, but I think we're taught from a very long time, and you know, it's very much a shift that we have to consciously make in those deliveries, and that it's okay to bring that emotions, and it makes for a richer experience.
My take is I don't categorize it into technical information, right? If it's something I'm supposed to, if I'm presenting on it, I'm guessing I'm not researching right before I'm speaking on it. It's something I know about, right? And if it's something I know about, I just have a conversation. It's like if I'm talking to one person instead of the audience. I don't look at it as looking at an audience and presenting. I have to look for if it's technical, but this is a wide audience, and I don't know that everyone is technically inclined. Then I have to speak where I can present it in layman's terms to anyone, right? So if you know the material, just know how to present it in a different way. And I like laughing. I like comedy. I love smiling. And I really believe getting to know someone, you know them better through laughing. and getting to know each other that way and gain their interest. So you find in presenting technical information, you find ways to bring real life into it, just like church. You know, a pastor will go over a Bible verse, right? And then they will present a real life story to bring out the Bible verse from back then, right? Same thing with technical information. You have technical information, but bring it out in a way where people can relate to it in real life.
Beautiful. You know, I just want to say I met Mitch at the UTC conference about, I don't know, a month and a half ago or so, right? Never, just met him there, right? And I said he's different. And it's exactly, Mitch, you came on just right after I was saying this, is you came on after, so you missed it. But I was saying that people don't hear, they hear this much of what you say in that moment. What they really hear is the story that got you there.
Yeah.
And that's the example. That's why I became very interested in Mitch. I'm like, I want to be part of that journey that got him there, to have that attitude, because when I heard him speak on stage, I'm like, you rock.
So you come from a different, background that's not technical.
I was going to say that.
So what's your perspective, and what is your, I mean, do you have any tips and advice on communication? Because I mean, I believe, I mean, I've known you for a little while, but you know Anthony through like acting, coaching, and correct?
Right.
Yeah. So from that perspective, like, do you have any thoughts on kind of this conversation that we're having that could be, you know, beneficial for us that are in the technical space that are trying to communicate better?
I would probably try to make it fun. I would be funny. I would, you know what I mean? You want that human connection. And like I think what you're saying is that it is a conversation you're having. So that conversation means you bring yourself, whatever you have, you bring yourself.
I'm going to chime in. This is a really important thing, I believe. Everyone, all roads are leading to this. Bring yourself, be authentic, connect, care, right? What's the obstacle to that? Because if it was just that, we'd all just do it all the time. I have a good sense of what they are, but I really want to cast it out, because, you know, these are great takeaways, but then we go out and then sometimes we don't do that. We pull back, right?
I think it's fear of not looking smart, intelligent. I mean, to me, those are the biggest things. Not being right, being offensive, I mean, you know, all of these things that people put on it.
The fear of being mocked, being talked about, our intelligence or expertise or knowledge being criticized, even behind our back, in our minds. You know what I mean? Right. When, like, you ever walk away with that head trash when you walk out? Oh my God, I bet they're all saying the most ridiculous things about me, right? So we all have this. This is not right. So, but when it's really strong, when that here's the thing, when that level is stronger, higher than the level of need to communicate, you'll always have that. There'll always be, it'll always compromise your message.
We're fed this idea that if you're technical, if you're in STEM, if you're an engineer, you can't communicate, you're an introvert, you're not good at this. Does that then feed into our fears about not presenting well and not having that conversation? Because we are fed this storyline from the time that you're probably like entering whatever school that you're going to, that you're not going to be good at this, because that's not what technical people do. And technical people aren't good at this. And so you have a storyline internally that's like, I'm not going to be good at this.
But I think that's compounded, being, in my personal opinion, and we're close to the same age, Kathy, and I was oftentimes the only woman in the entire room, sometimes a conference. I sometimes wonder too if that's been equated with technical people are male and therefore there's less emotion. So the expectation we feed, I don't know if it's gender driven, it's just an observation I've made over time that seems to be, I get that whole, because I tend to be more emotional, and I get that whole, well, you're female. So.
And I talk about it a lot on my podcast, and maybe I just need to stop, because what if I'm feeding into other people's stories? What if
Mm.
I'm planting that seed?
And I think it was from the
I think
technical
a lot of
perspective,
this-
it was always just, you're supposed to present just facts, right? Like going through school and everything, you're just there to
Mhm.
deliver the facts. You don't have to deliver anything else. Just do the facts, kind of like Dragnet, right? Joe Friday. Just give me the facts. And that's the mindset that I've always had from that perspective as well.
But I just an observation, especially when Kathy was speaking, it's like, and I think you're all coming to the same conclusion, is that we're kind of taught this way. We're kind of taught to wear a mask, and actually what we should be doing is the opposite, which is opening up.
Yeah.
You know.
And it's the bravery of the relationship with thyself to know it's okay. And also, my ending point, if I just want to put something out, is, there's a saying, it's not my business what you think about me. We have our responsibility to be who and what we are, and it will not always be accepted. And we have to accept emotionally and psychologically that who and what we are will not always be accepted. That when we could really accept that, then we could be more free to be. If we can't accept that, we will constantly be trying to conform, fit, and be everything to everyone. Be that perfect to everyone else. I want to keep talking, but I did promise I'm going to end on time, and I can't go over. If anyone wants to say anything, it's like a 15-second something.
I got one comment on the last thing you said.
Sir.
Your opinion of me is none of my business.
Right.
Love that.
Very nice. I want to say, let's give Kathy a big, wonderful hand. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
My
This is
pleasure.
great.